Hello, my name's Lindy Cowling and welcome to my channel. Change of venue today. Like to keep people on their toes, so according to how the mood takes me or the energy takes me, I like to slightly change the venue of where I'm filming from. As the spring and summer comes on, I do plan to be doing some filming outside, so that will change again. Today I want to make just a short film, and that short film is going to be called Eggs. I could have called it some really complicated title to do with what is consciousness, but a lot of what I want to talk about is to do with eggs and consciousness, so it was much simpler to call it Eggs. Anyone who's seen any of my films before knows I like to simplify things and keep them as uncomplicated as possible. So, eggs and what is consciousness? Consciousness at its purity, at its heart, is an essence of energy. It's the existence of energy, its essence. It just is. It's consciousness. And consciousness comprises of its beingness, i.e. it just is, but it's also comprised of a state of peace and a pure state of love, because in its beingness, in it just being what it is, in that purity there is only peace and there is only harmony and there is only the energy of love. So consciousness in its purity, the purity of consciousness is the beingness. It's almost what people, and I feel this is what people are saying when they say the I am presence. It is. And what happens is, as we, as expressions of consciousness, as we choose to come down in form of spirit and in form of through the soul, as an expression of consciousness, we come into human vessels, or we choose vessels to come in as to experience ourselves as consciousness and to have life experiences that we can project our consciousness through. It's a bit like a projector, like a film projector, and people sometimes talk about holograms. If we rewind a little bit, let's rewind the projector a little bit and say that again, consciousness is when everything again is stripped away, when there is no programming, there's no belief systems, there's not even a personality or personality at that point. You are consciousness. You're just this, this energy, this purity, this spirit. Then when you come into the form at which you want to express consciousness through a man, through a woman, through something else, and into the families you want to express consciousness through and have interactions and projections and all these different dramas and scenarios that you can play consciousness out through within the human body, that's when you start to get the human personality involved and human characteristics involved and that kind of dynamic. This is where you can get the choice here of how energy and consciousness is expressed, because sometimes consciousness is expressed through what we would perceive to be extremely negatively, what some would say was evil. But there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of pain. Sometimes energy is spent, consciousness is expressed in that way. It had that purity, but then there was a choice at some level, or you could say interference at some level, whatever way you want to interpret this, to express consciousness in a negative way. There's also the choice to express consciousness in a positive way, in a wonderful, loving way, a caring way, a healing way for yourself and for humanity. And there's also the choice to express consciousness in a neutral position. Now I have to laugh when I say that, because most of us go many years or a lifetime to actually get to a point where we can express consciousness in a neutral position, where we don't get triggered by dramas and we don't get triggered by people's interactions and we don't go into the pain body over what's happening in the world. For some of us it takes a lifetime, for others it's much quicker, to get to this point where you're aware of the consciousness of the being you are, the spirit you are, and so you don't get totally lost in and immersed in the holographic projections of the people around you and the human vessel that you're expressing that consciousness through. So you are, so much more than your personality. You're so much more than the factors in your life. You're so much more than your circumstances. Now, to a certain degree, you've chosen how to express consciousness. If you're expressing it through very challenging circumstances or illness or, like I say, suffering. But I will only sort of go along with that to a certain degree, because if you have divine amnesia and you have forgotten that you are the consciousness expressing itself, then again, like I say, you can get lost and believe and not even know and have the realization that you have got a choice on certain things. And don't forget, on a certain level you may have chosen as consciousness before your arrival in a human vessel to experience deprivation in some capacity, to experience illness in some capacity, to experience challenges in some capacity. So you can see what I'm saying. There are so many variations on the expression of the consciousness that you are. But I'm hoping that this short video brings people watching this comfort, brings them comfort to realise that they are not an individual expression of personality. Oh, I just got a huge flash of light come out when I said that. Oh. But they are a unique expression of consciousness. I repeat that. People aren't an individual expression of personality, but they are a unique expression of consciousness. because there's so much more than the personality. So whatever circumstances they find themselves in life, they are so much more than those circumstances dictate. Now, why I was calling this video eggs is because tied in with this is everything is a level of consciousness, and how you experience things as the essence you are, as the spirit you are, as the soul, if you like, you are, is dependent on the level of consciousness that you're aware of, or I could say the level of consciousness that you're at. So again, let's make it a simple example. If a mouse, like I've heard this example before, and it says it kind of perfectly, if a mouse is sitting on the foot of an elephant, the mouse's perception of the floor of the jungle would be its whole world, because that's all it's seen. If the mouse were to travel up the elephant's leg and sit on the elephant's back, then the mouse would see that the panorama of the jungle was completely different to what it had been aware of. Almost like a different world, really. But it's the same world, it's just viewed through a different state of consciousness, more awareness, a different state of awareness. So where your consciousness, where your awareness is at, is how you would perceive the world you're in. If you put a man in two men in the same situation, one man may perceive his life as being in tatters, in pieces, and feel he has no free will, no choice, that his life is very hard. And another man in exactly the same circumstances may be much happier. His life, he may be much healthier. He may feel that he is very lucky to have the life he has. He may perceive that in a whole different way because of his level of consciousness. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other. They are different expressions of consciousness. And who are we to say that the man who's not experiencing it harder chose before his arrival in the human vessel to experience consciousness in a challenging way, the human vessel in a challenging way? It doesn't mean to say that the guy with a challenging aspects or viewing it as challenging isn't as spiritual or connected as the other guy. Who are we to say that, like I say, that he didn't choose to experience it that way? But again, in an ideal scenario, you would think that no expression of consciousness would choose suffering, no expression of consciousness would choose pain, no expression of consciousness would choose dark or bad. In an ideal universe, really, not just an ideal earth, you would hope perhaps that everybody would choose consciousness to be with as least amount of suffering as possible. That is not the way that history and experience has shown us. Not that way at all. It's that consciousness has expressed itself in all ways, in all polarities, in a huge diversity that it can, to very deep depths and very extreme elements of a higher expression of consciousness. But where I go back to the word eggs is I've become aware about 6 months ago in my own journey that as part of the programming of consciousness, programming by ourselves, programming by society, belief systems, and programming outside of us, negatively, intentionally, and positively, intentionally, No judgment here, just saying it, you know, as I've become aware of it. Consciousness, because of that, I've become aware that there are elements of when we believe that we have been tapping in to perhaps the ultimate, that has actually been almost like what I would call, I'm going to call it a light program. I call it the light program. So I always see it as an egg, and like we've been tapping into the yolk, we've been in the yolk, sorry, we've been tapping into the egg white, where the yolk, and then the egg white seems like the light. But actually, when your consciousness, you shift a state of consciousness to, like tuning a radio station to a different frequency. It is a higher frequency, but again, there's no judgment in that. It's tuning it up in vibration. You become aware that actually that was just one level, and the white at the top of the egg was just that level of consciousness and the top of what your consciousness felt it could reach at that time. So you can go beyond the egg or beyond the eggs and go into a consciousness still deeper. I have to use the English language here. I'm very aware when I'm speaking, or people might interpret it like this. I hope you know me well enough from these videos now to know where I'm coming from, and I have to use the language I've got. So I would say an expression of consciousness deeper, an expression of consciousness higher. So as you come out of this awareness of the egg, you would come into what, I'm going to have to use the language I've got again, and I'm deeply spiritual, but I'm not religious. I have to call it what it's been called in the culture I'm in at the moment, in this timeline, and it's Christ consciousness. What is my interpretation or experience of Christ consciousness? The awareness of being out of the egg yolk, not tapping into the top of the egg white, and the awareness of being absolute, the awareness of the beingness, the awareness of consciousness. The light just shifted in here dramatically again then. The awareness of being everything, the awareness not of the whole lineage and ancestry, but actually being the whole or ancestry and lineage at the same time, being the light at the same time, almost not having to tap into the light like reaching the top of an egg, because you are already the egg. Again, it's being everything. It's a different state of awareness which absolutely everybody has, that capacity within the consciousness that they are. Again, let's rewind. Consciousness, essence, spirit, infinite consciousness, forever, no ending to it, not determined by financial status, not determined by religion, not determined by skin colour, not determined by your sex, not determined by a family situation, not determined by job, not determined by anything. Infinite consciousness, infinite awareness, infinite beingness. The light is constantly changing on this video, and I just find that so amusing, because it's really what I'm talking about. See, some people would call consciousness light. That's they would call it, it's love and light, it's light. That's one way, I guess, of expressing what consciousness is. And it's interesting to me that we're talking about this, and I'm going all the time here, it goes darker, it goes light, it goes darker, it's going light, and I have no control over that element of it. My consciousness, I guess, this is showing in this way, so that what I'm talking about is, I'm saying all the time, you know, you can express consciousness in a darker way, or a way through more suffering. or a lighter way, an easier way, but there's no judgment in that. But once you have the awareness that you are infinite consciousness, and once you have the awareness that you can have, to a certain degree, an element of choice here, once you have the realization there's a shift in your energy field, once you have the realization that you are consciousness and you have an element of a way of expressing that you are bigger than the personality and the circumstances of your life, then you, at the very least, that can bring comfort to you. At the very least, that can alleviate that state of consciousness, more than state of mind. State of consciousness can alleviate much of your suffering. But also it can give you the courage to perhaps make changes that need to be made once you're aware, once you adopt this state of consciousness. I mean, I've said that word over and over again because it's bigger than a state of mind. Really, it's a state of awareness. It's like tuning a radio station. And when you realize you can retune your radio station, you don't have to stay on one that perhaps hasn't been beneficial to you for a while, that hasn't been serving you for a while. You can change that radio station. You don't have to stay in the egg, and you're not cracked. So don't be a chicken. How many more metaphors can I use here about eggs and chickens? Don't be a chicken, and hatch out into the greater state of consciousness that you wish to express, or just be aware of it and take great comfort in that beingness, in that awareness. I will love you and leave you. I don't know how this video's turned out. All I've been aware is that there's been a lot of light phenomena going off. It keeps going light, it keeps going dark. I don't think I've done one like this, but then I've not spoken about consciousness, infinite consciousness in this way. So obviously it's meant to be seen, you know, the different polarities of it, the different expressions of consciousness on camera. That's why it keeps shifting, the light keeps shifting. Right, on that note, I'll love you and leave you, and I will see you soon. And I hope, however you're expressing your consciousness, that it's a way that brings you some peace and some happiness. Thank you. Bye bye.